Next email we have comes to us from Julie from Topeka, Kansas. Hi, guys. I recently found this podcast. Been listening to it for a few episodes now. I love when you all talk retro. I apologize if this question has been asked before, but I was wondering, what was y'all's first video game you ever played, and what game really got you into the hobby? Thanks.
Hubert.
I was gonna say Dan's face looks stumped. Like,
no, it's Nintendo. Well, realistically, it's Atari, but Nintendo would be, probably Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt and stuff. That would be like the smattering of the first games I played. When I really started to get into it, though, if that's what we're talking, is getting a Super Nintendo, and just like Nintendo has a lot of stuff on it, and it's but a lot of it's primitive. Super Nintendo was the first time where it's like a game could take you 60 hours, 80 hours. You could replay stuff. Look at a game like Chrono Trigger, where it's got multiple endings.
Yeah.
I think that's when I first finally started to get heavily into games as a hobby, as opposed to just playing Nintendo for an hour or something.
Yeah, I can see that.
Getting guides, reading guides, getting a subscription to game magazines.
There you go.
Getting, not that a lot of this stuff existed in the early 90s, but getting like toys and other things that went along with it, and started to get into that kind of stuff. And which, ruined my life, but that's fine now.
Hey, ruined all of our lives. For me, first game I ever played would be original Super Mario Brothers. Because my parents of all people, they came home with an NES. This would have been when it launched. This would be a couple of years after, because I was very young.
I was 3.
I was like 3. Yeah. So this would have been like 89. It had to have been the same year as Batman came out, because I remember vividly. One of my earliest memories. I remember vividly is seeing the trailer for that on TV and then hounding them. We need to go to the theater.
Yeah.
I want to see that. And we went. So I bothered them enough that we went. So that was one of my first movies as a kid, was that and Little Mermaid. But Mario Brothers would be the first game I ever played. First that like maybe really got me into the hobby, like more so like getting obsessive about it. I go back and forth on this a little bit. If you want to talk NES era, it'd be a combo of Castlevania and Castlevania 3. In that era, I did not play Castlevania 2. I discovered that later. Castlevania as a franchise, I mean, I think I've told you this, Dan. I didn't discover Castlevania as a franchise on the NES. I discovered it at our local Pizza Hut.
Oh, yeah.
On that arcade machine, which like that, you want to talk about a holy grail item I would like to have in my collection? That fucking arcade machine.
Yeah.
Yes. Which I still kick myself. I never went and asked them, like, $50, I'll haul it myself and just put it back together. Because it's just a tube TV and it's a very like not complex arcade cabinet.
What was this?
To what other ones are?
Machine.
Yeah, like you would sit down. It's two-sided. So one side of it was Castlevania, had a tube TV, and then the other side of it had a different tube TV and was Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
So
I remember it vividly.
Sure. And then the one that really broke me into it though between Castlevania was Castlevania 3. Because at the time I discovered Castlevania, like 1, 2, and 3 were already out, and then going to my friend Steve's house down the street, he had Castlevania 3. So discovering that, I'm like, oh, there's a third game, and then just really getting into it whatever summer that was, because we just kept taking turns until we beat it, and that was really like I really enjoyed that. And then after that, it would have been Super Nintendo. So Super Nintendo, like going to, and I think we've talked about that too. Like I've talked about how I got my Super Nintendo, but a precursor to that was the same people that sold me their Super Nintendo when I was a kid. We went to, they had like, it was somebody that my dad worked with. They had like a barbecue or something. And so we went to go to that, and it was one of those situations you probably remember in the 90s too. Like parents had a party. What do the kids do? They go in the basement and play video games.
Yeah, my dad.
And I remember
like that. Yeah,
I remember going down in the basement. First time I ever even seen a Super Nintendo. I didn't even know it existed. Like, what is this? Oh, it's Super Nintendo. The fuck is Super Nintendo? Hey, let's look at Super Mario World. Blew my fucking mind. all I talked about after that. That is probably why when that kid was like, I'm going to college overseas and, we can sell this Super Nintendo. That is probably why my dad was like, we'll buy it, because I wouldn't shut up about Super Mario World.
Yeah.
After I played, it's like, I don't want to play Super Mario Brothers 3. Get out of here. I want to play Super Mario World. So, but Castlevania 3 probably, because it blew my mind how that game looked. The complexity, like if you go from Castlevania 1 to 3, just the complexity of those 8-bit graphics between those two games,
for sure.
insane. So, and then the other weird, I'll throw this out there. I wouldn't say it like brought me into it, but I have a lot of reverence for it. And I've pointed it out to you at different conventions. Some point I'll get it. 8 Eyes for NES.
Oh,
played a lot of that game randomly.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely
weird game.
There were definitely a lot of weird Nintendo games that I played too much of. And I couldn't tell you why. Silent Service, like the submarine game, I remember playing it all the time. Not a great game.
Shalom, is that what it's called? The downhill ski game.
Shalom's a different word.
Okay. I played a lot of that.
Yeah, that.
That too.
Mega Man 1 was another one that like I just played over and Turtles 1, even though Turtles 1 is impossible. I played it over and over and over and over and over as a kid.
Turtles in Time was the one I think I started with.
Oh, okay.
And then went back and was like, oh, there's these other ones.
2 and 3 are good.
Turtles in Time, we played so much.
2 and 3 are good. One's not.
And then I remember going to, obviously, like, if you were a Super Nintendo kid, you would have the one weird friend that would have a Genesis or vice versa. So I remember going to the one weird friend that had a Genesis and be like, what's this Hyperstone Heist game? And be like, what is this? Or like, hey, you have Batman Returns for the Genesis, but it's a completely fucking different game than my Super Nintendo one.
Ghostbusters and stuff was.
Yeah, what is happening? Yeah, so crazy. It's a crazy.
We would decide what game we wanted to play, and then we'd just go to that person's house for the day.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
You want to play hockey? All right, we'll go to your house because you have the Genesis, and the Genesis has the better version of hockey. But let's go play Mario or something at my house. Like that.
I'll also say, like, early days of that would be like only if it was a rainy day.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, the parents would be like, no, you go play outside. And then at some point, it was like, fuck it, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be inside watching Power Rangers or, at one point I remember this would have been my friend Steve. I remember his dad brought home their first computer.
Ooh.
And then that was the first time I experienced Doom.
Yeah.
And Duke Nukem.
Yeah. Wolfenstein.
Mind blowing as a kid that age, seeing something like Doom.
I played a lot of
fucking insane.
Wolfenstein.
And then playing a lot of Doom on that Super Nintendo. Not a good version of that game. But I played a lot of it. So
what about you, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead, Matt. we kind of dominated it. So
no, you're good. Q*bert, like I said, Q*bert for me was probably the very first game I remember vividly playing. I played a lot of Quicks on the Game Boy.
Okay.
But I never really got into the Game Boy, like as the handheld. That was really the only game my parents bought. That was the only game we played on road trips and stuff. I think for me, like the NES was Duck Hunt, Super Mario Brothers. I played the first Ninja Turtles game religiously. Still never beat it to this day because I got too pissed off and I just can't do it anymore. Then I played 2 and 3, and I think what really did it for me, because the NES wasn't it was cool, but there wasn't a lot that I really gravitated to, and I didn't have a lot of friends that played video games. A lot of my friends played outside more than anything else.
There's definitely a lot of that, though.
So, like, it was just kind of one of those things where, like, if I wanted to play games, I did it by myself. And, at that point, it wasn't really a lot of fun, so you just never really played. But I would have to say that I think the Super Nintendo is what really got me in, because I played Super Mario Brothers 2, and I was like, or Super Mario World. Insane. And I was like, yeah, this game's fucking dope. And then when I found out about the star map, and then that you could reverse it and change all the hidden thing in it, and like that became a whole new game, even though it was still the same game.
Yeah,
was a lot of fun. And then TMNT, Turtles in Time, was a great one for me. So I think that's what really did it for me, because again, my parents didn't like video games. My sisters didn't really care for the video games. We had two TVs that were always being fought about. So like gaming wasn't anything I really did. But I remember vividly telling my parents I really wanted a PlayStation when it came out.
PS1.
Yeah, and I really wanted Resident Evil 1.
There you go.
Because I saw commercials on it, and I was like, this game looks dope. Like, can I get it? And I remember the Christmas, it was the first time I actually snuck out and I snuck in the room and like looked for presents.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I like cut the tape off the corner and like you kind of unfold it and shit. And yeah. And then I had to like tape the tape and
never went
directly tape it back.
No, I didn't.
Oh yeah. Yeah, man. I was in it. Like, and I remember opening the one box because I was like, I'm just gonna do one and I won't touch anything else because I just want to check it out. And I opened it up and it was a PlayStation and I was like, well, let's just tape that back up. I just ruined my own Christmas. And kind of went like that. So I mean, I opened it on Christmas, got Resident Evil 1, and that just kind of took off. And then that's where I just started collecting random stuff out of the blue out of that time. And
well, that,
you know,
it's the funny thing for me to look back on because, like I said, my parents bought an NES for Tetris, not Mario. Mm-hmm. And they would play like up. My parents would play games up until 3D. When 64 happened, that was when they're like, "This is too complicated for us." Because they played like even Super Nintendo, like they would play Mario World. They would play anything like 2D side scroller. I remember when Tetris 2 came out. I remember like my dad was always very big of like, you know, I couldn't buy a lot of games but rent everything. But for whatever reason, of course, we could go buy Tetris 2.
Of course.
Which I don't think he ended up liking as much as the original Tetris, but the minute the 64 came out, and it probably is the same thing. We look at that controller now and go, "This is a fucking nightmare." I don't know.
My dad's a great example of that too, where he bought me a Nintendo. I asked him once. I was probably like 14 when I was like, what did you buy a Nintendo for? He's like, well, I saw it and I thought it was neat. My dad was always very interested, I guess, like in the idea of video games.
Yeah,
because he grew up going to bars and playing arcades and playing foosball and all that kind of stuff. So he thought it'd be cool to have one for the home. We'd play a little bit of Nintendo together when it would be like baseball or anything like that. Super Nintendo, he kind of jumped off of it too. But then when we got to the 64, he was obviously like he was completely out because he's like, it's just too much. But he would still. I remember the day that I got Ocarina of Time. I made a big deal about it, and he was like, well, let me see what it's like. So when we put it in, he was like, this is awesome. He's like, oh, well, he would never play it, but he definitely had an appreciation for like what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say that would be the same thing for my parents too. Is like they would watch some of the stuff. My grandma of all people, huge fan of watching me play games. Like Mario is her favorite. But yeah, no, it's like we hit that 64 era, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like it's like, and now looking back on it, you look at that 64 controller, I understand.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh yeah.
So, but good question overall. I don't think we've ever been asked
something
that
maybe similar, but yeah, not about that.
No, not that one.